franchise that is the crux of why we are fans. The rich, amazing history of a team that reflects the attitude of this town's people and embodies the spirit of everyone sitting in these seats. But when we step back and look, there is one thing that from Philadelphia to Wilmington, from Haverford to Pennsauken, from Westchester to Allentown, cuts through it all and bonds us, every one of us. Every fall, it is the Eagles green that runs through the veins of the young and old, and the divides that exist between races and creeds, rich and poor, the 700 level and the lower bowl are all gone, and we are suddenly one.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 6 of Fandemonium here on the AAT Sports Network and the AAT Birds. I am Chip at Chip for the Birds, joined by Johnny U, 9322. And our special guest today is Mr. Louie DiBiase. He was the host of Locked On Birds for the Locked On Podcast Network. He also does Eagles content for Fox 43 Sports. He's the host of WJR 550, and he's a sour beer guy.
That's right. That's right.
What do you mean by sour beer guy? I need to know more about that right off the bat.
I'm a big sour beer fan. I mean, you guys ever have sour beer before? Not into IPAs. I'm not into porters or stouts. It's sour beer for me. And I mean like the actual sours that they make, not like beer that's gone bad. I need to make that clear. Not like sour milk. The actual sour beers that are being made. Yeah, I've definitely been dabbling in those the last few years for sure. So, but thanks guys for having me on the show. I've seen a bunch of these already before and appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Very cool. Yeah, man. So we're really excited. Like we said, this is a YouTube exclusive show where we talk to people around the Philadelphia area, around the country. We just talk about why we love the Philadelphia Eagles, because we find that we have more things in common when we talk about the Birds than, the things that separate us. So yeah. I have to know, because we're going to get into it right away, what is your very first Eagles memory?
That's a great question. And look, I'm still a younger Eagles fan. So born in 97, really didn't start getting into sports until, 7 or 8 years old. So for me, it was actually after the McNabb, Dawkins, Westbrook era, or I should say at the, final years of that era. I remember specifically that 2006 run where Jeff Garcia took that team on a win streak down the stretch to push them into the playoffs. Not only that, but win a playoff game as well. Very similar to what, he was kind of the Nick Foles before Nick Foles without the Super Bowl, more like 2018 Foles, where they got in and they made the postseason and then even snuck out a playoff win. That to me is my earliest memory, was watching that 2006 team go on a run. And so, I had always been a big fan of mobile quarterbacks. It's kind of what got me into football. Michael Vick, Donovan McNabb, seeing highlights of Randall Cunningham. Would have loved to see Cunningham growing up for sure. One of the few players I missed and that I do regret, just based on age. But it was kind of after, at the end of those NFC title runs before 2008's run, that really propelled me into becoming an Eagles fan. So I'd say that's my earliest memory, is actually the Garcia run. And it's cool now because you're seeing a lot of prospects, like in players that have signed with the Eagles that are from Philly, right? Kazir White, Hassan Riddick. They were Eagles fans growing up. Ohio State receiver Garrett Wilson. But now, considering the age of prospects, they're all like, I grew up watching Vic, McCoy, Macklin, Jackson. And it's kind of cool that that's the case, because when I used to say that, people would be like, how old are you on the podcast? So, I grew up in kind of the, post NFC title runs era of Eagles football.
But no, that's cool because, and you talk about these players who are coming up and they're from this area, like Kaiser White. Like I went to high school with his brother. So I went to the same high school he did, same area as him. So for me, it's the hometown feel. It's an awesome stuff. Like for me, I enjoy that because you look at that and you're like, wow, he's actually from this area. He is from the area. Hassan Riddick from the area. Temple, worked his tail off to be that. But it is cool to see. And I know what you're saying with, these players are now, for me, a lot of these players are now younger than me. And I know Chip the same way. They're younger. So it's just like, you get to that point where now you're getting older and you're looking at these guys and now you're, okay, well, now I'm getting older. Oh, geez. But, it's all in all, it's fun. We want our team to always win no matter, who's out there. We don't want a 45-year-old Tom Brady playing because he's going to be older.
I wouldn't exactly hate it. He's still doing.
Wow.
It's funny because, like, 35, and I go, oh well, he's old, and the guy's like 34 years old. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, well, he's football old. So you mentioned like the second wave of players, Louie, and it's like, that was the offensive showman. When we had the McCoys and we had the Vicks and we had the Deshaun Jackson, there was offense pouring out of the link every which way, and that was exciting for football.
It makes sense that there's a lot of fans that are, in their mid to early 20s that grew up Eagles fans, because although, those Vic, McCoy, Macklin, Jackson teams didn't even win a single playoff game, from 2000, I would say 2009 to 2013, 2014, if you will, when Macklin was really and McCoy, the final guys of that era to leave. Even though they didn't have any real team success, they were such an exciting product on the field. Yeah. I mean, 2010, there are so many fans that are now like getting into their adulthood that became Eagles fans in that era. And it was hard not to when you had maybe the best mobile quarterback of all time at the time, the greatest deep threat of all time, maybe the greatest running back in space ever in LaShawn McCoy, Jeremy Macklin, who was so explosive but was underrated because of Vic, McCoy, and Jackson. That, it makes sense that Garrett Wilson grew up loving that football team, and myself, and Kazir White and Hassan Riddick. It's cool though, and at the same time, it is kind of like, holy crap, we're getting old. That prospects heading into the league now are saying, I grew up an Eagles fan, and I grew up watching McCoy, Macklin, Jackson. You're like, damn. I mean, I can't believe we're already there. Where those guys are, inspirations for the current era of NFL football. So it is really neat though.
Yeah, and you hit the point there. You hit it, talking about that. And one thing I want to ask you now is, we're going to exclude the Super Bowl on this, just because it's going to be a lot of people
off the table. Can't do it.
Eagles, your favorite Eagles memory. We're going to exclude the Super Bowl. So, what is your favorite Eagles memory?
Man, there's a lot. And again, there's some seasons that I hold dear to my heart that other people don't. Like 2019 for me, I really loved because, as much as the Super Bowl season, I wouldn't change anything about it. 2018 was an incredible run as well. The double doink, getting nearly back to the NFC Championship, just these incredible, nerve-wracking deep season runs where they had to run the table to make the postseason. I enjoyed 2019 as toxic as that season was, because for me, we were all so invested still in Carson Wentz as the franchise quarterback, and he had not gone on that playoff run that Nick Foles had took this team on the last 2 years. And as much as we love Foles, and again, wouldn't change that story, at the same time, like when you have the guy in Wentz that you thought was going to be here for a decade plus, you wanted to see him take you on that run and build upon that, because he was going to be the guy moving forward. So when he finally got that monkey off his back, in the way he did it, with practice squad level skill position players, winning out the month of December, being the hottest quarterback in football to win the NFC East, that was something I really enjoyed covering. And then as a kid, it was 2010. I mean, that was such a magical season. And again, I was so enamored with mobile quarterbacks, and Michael Vick finally put everything together and just felt like an unstoppable force, the mobility, but finally the arm talent with all of those weapons. They lost in the wild card round against the Green Bay Packers, but I just had so much fun with those two seasons that, when removing the Super Bowl, removing NFC title runs like 2008 and earlier, I think 2010 and 2019 were just some incredible experiences. And I got to go to my first game ever. Actually, that was 2011, the Dream Team year in Buffalo, which is where I grew up. But I would say those are the two seasons to me that were, most memorable for me.
So kind of jumping onto that a little bit, you get to do a lot with Locked on the Birds. So what is probably the coolest thing that you've been able to experience because of kind of what you do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, that's the thing. You asked about memories specifically. Like, I've been really blessed, even though I've grown up in Buffalo my entire life and still live here. And sometimes that sucks as an Eagles fan. Like, you want to feel a part of the community. But the great thing is the podcast and social media really does help you. It doesn't really feel like I'm not a part of it at all. And so the podcast, I've been blessed to really provide me a lot of opportunities to feel a part of it. But even outside the show, like I remember the first game in Buffalo, to see Vic break the all-time quarterback rushing record was something really special. And, just taking a tour of the link for the first time and getting to go to the draft in 2017 was a dream come true, something on my bucket list. The podcast, though, has opened up a lot of opportunities too, especially this year. Getting to go down to Mobile, Alabama for the first time and cover the Senior Bowl was really surreal. To see so many, media members that I grew up watching and listening to, Dave Spadaro and the guys from the Inquirer and ESPN, just so many people that, again, I grew up idolizing. I'm like, the fact that I was there at that same stage because of this platform, I felt really blessed, and it felt surreal the entire time being on the field, talking to these prospects. And the podcast, I owe everything to the show, and it's really blessed me and my co-host Gino Camilleri with those chances. And just to talk to you guys and so many fans across the world, to be connected with that I would have never known without Locked On Eagles. Again, just an absolute dream come true. So yeah, it's been awesome. And again, I feel like I've lived an incredible life fandom wise for the Birds. And I haven't even gotten to Philadelphia yet, living there full time, obviously visiting a ton, but so definitely blessed in that way because of the show.
Yeah. And you're able to, meet so many people, not even in person, but through Twitter and, conversations.
Yeah, I feel like I've known guys for years, and I met a couple of guys from Eagles Twitter in Alabama, and we were talking like we've known each other for a decade because we've been talking on Twitter for a decade.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing because you're able to have conversations with people and break things down with each other, and you can have disagreements and everything. Everyone, you shouldn't agree on everything. Nobody agrees on everything.
Right.
Chip and I argue about stuff. It's what it is, but it brings out to be able to have different opinions, to be able to talk to each other, and to be able to meet these people. Talk to you. Talk to you here. Meet through your podcast, stuff like this. It's great because you can use that and bond and use friendships and stuff like that you can be able to do. And I think that's great. And I think
completely agree. And I don't mean to cut you off, but you just sparked a memory too, is like the pandemic really made me appreciate Eagles Twitter, this community on social media, because when everybody was locked down and we really just had nothing to do, and it was a scary time and just so much unknown, to have the podcasting and to have everybody, especially during draft season in the spring in 2020, when that really hit, to be able to all come together and interact and have that distraction when you're kind of locked down at home. Those few months, again, it was a scary time, but I'll always look back at that fondly because of what happened with the podcast and with, Eagles social media. It felt like it got even closer, and it made me appreciate it even more. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. I said, and end of this month, April, it'll be 2 years we started AATBIRDS. So
yeah,
you're 100% right. And the one question I want to, lead into now, you mentioned a bunch of players. Okay. Now you're gonna have to choose one of these players because I need to know your favorite Eagle and why.
Yeah. 3 names popped up for me: Deshaun Jackson, Michael Vick, and as much as people right now are going to cringe at it, Carson Wentz, because that was to me the first franchise quarterback that I had seen. And again, I watched the end of McNabb's era, but I was too young to really enjoy the early 2000s runs. Like, just straight up, I'm only 24 years old. So they had never really, they kept going with these flashes in the pan, right? Even Michael Vick only had that one great year. Nick Foles had the one great year in 2013 before he came back. And, then they tried with Sam Bradford. They never really had moved up in the first round and invested in the guy, like a franchise quarterback that you knew could be here for 10 plus years, perhaps a top talent that could be one of the best. So that was really special to me back in 2016. But again, sorry to go off on a tangent there. Deshaun Jackson is my favorite of all time. And just because of the pure excitement level of his abilities, you had no idea at any moment that guy could completely change the game. All it took was one touch of the football and he could take it, 80 yards to the house. I mean, that guy could put up 1,300 yards in a season and it wouldn't take the, 120 receptions it does other players. He could do in 1 or 2 touches what it took other, like Michael Thomas, what it would take him 10 receptions to do. And so that pure excitement level, when you saw the quarterback, cock his shoulders up, you knew Jackson was open down the field. I mean, that was such an exciting product of football. And I know he, flamed out that second time around, but I'll always appreciate even that first game back in 2019 against Washington. Well, the fan in me, the analyst in me knows what a bad trade that was bringing him back.
Right.
But the fan in me will always appreciate the better ending he had in Philly with just that moment of seeing Wentz hit him on those 2 deep, touchdowns and kind of unwrite what Chip Kelly did. Jackson, by far, to me, is my favorite of all time.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the fact of the analyst versus the fan in you.
Yeah.
Because we have that conversation on our shows all the time where it's, just get rid of everybody. And then we go, well, wait a second. We're trying to run a, slightly intelligent, more fan-based show. And okay, well, here's what you have to do. So one question that Johnny always likes to know some inner workings of your brain is the what ifs. See, Philadelphia Eagles history is full of the what ifs. So in your time as an Eagles fan, what is your biggest what if moment?
I did an entire series on this actually during the pandemic a couple years ago. I swear to God, I have 5 shows during the week. I did a bunch of what ifs. Like, what if the Eagles had traded up for Russell Wilson? What happens? Does Andy Reid keep his job? Do you win a Super Bowl? 2017, you never draft Nick Foles, so he never comes back. You don't draft Carson Wentz. What happens with that scenario? I think, though, to me, the most interesting one is, even like what happens in 2016 if you don't get up there and don't get Carson Wentz? Do you win a Super Bowl? What if you take Jared Goff? What happens? Or if you don't take any at all, do you take a chance on like Patrick Mahomes the next year? There's so much. What if Randall Cunningham had weapons in the early 90s? Yeah. To me, though, the biggest one I'm curious about, not that I would want to unwrite it and just redo, but the Super Bowl season, what happens if Carson Wentz doesn't tear his ACL against the Rams?
Ooh.
Do they still win the Super Bowl? What happens in that playoff run? And then, I don't know what happened. Everything else could change the future of the Eagles because everything with Carson Wentz changed after that play. And I don't just mean physically, but mentally, because then the injuries piled up and the Foles playoff runs piled up, and that got into his psyche. And then the Jalen Hurts pick after the concussion. Like, I just wonder if that injury never happens, what the timeline is with Carson Wentz. And so maybe you don't have a Super Bowl, although I think they probably still would have won, but maybe you don't, but you still have Wentz long-term. I don't know. That's such a fascinating story. There's a lot of Wentz what-ifs for me. Like, if he doesn't get that concussion in 2019 from Jadeveon Clowney, do they ever trade, or I should say draft Jalen Hurts? And does Wentz falter in 2020? There's a lot of Wentz ones. I would say the Super Bowl, though. I'm just not that I would redo it. I love everything about what happened that year and the way they won their first title ever. But I'm just so curious to know how things would have went if he doesn't get sandwiched in the end zone in LA.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I have so many, and we talked before in the, before we started about graphics and stuff. I have a whole nother section in my phone with what if graphics and other players and Eagles things and older Eagles. And
you got to release them, man. I would love to talk to you guys about that. Like another one, like what if Chip Kelly trades up for Marcus Mariota? Chip Kelly doesn't get fired after 2015.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Mariota has a different story than in Tennessee, but what if Tennessee says, hey, we're going to keep Zach Mettenberger. We'll give you, Mariota for all those picks and quarterbacks you were going to trade us. There's a lot of them, man. It's super interesting.
It's definitely an interesting aspect. And the one, how I want to, our last question of this show, it's a good one because it really be able to bring out, your feelings about the fan base and everything. Is what makes, what is it about the Philadelphia Eagles that make them like the best team and fan base in football?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think it's the passion is just unmatched. And I've grown up in Buffalo, which is a very passionate sports market for the Buffalo.
They throw people through tables.
Yeah, exactly. It is it's definitely similar. And I think it's part of why I became I don't know, the Eagles felt familiar to me growing up because they had a familiar vibe to what the Bills fan base did. But I think the passion is just at another level. But there's a loud minority that give Eagles fans, I think, a bad reputation. But I think the majority of them have an intelligence on top of, the passion. And that's what I think Eagles Twitter has exposed me to. And again, once you decide to filter out the bad, for sure, because there can be a lot of it, and it gets to players. I mean, ask Nelson Aguilar, Jalen Reagor, Carson Wentz, there's a lot of them, but Donovan McNabb even. But I do think the majority of Eagles fans, truly care about this team and have a good understanding of what it takes. So I think that was something I gravitated towards. And, there's a reason you look at podcast charts all the time, and, there's like 10 to 15 Eagles shows in the top 100 or 200, because they just consume Eagles content 365 days a year. And that's how I've been growing up. Like, there is no off season for us. And nope. That's the great part of it. And especially when I'm doing a show 5 days a week, even throughout the off season, it's nice to do that for a fan base that cares, not like I'm doing it for Los Angeles,
Yeah.
Or Jackson.
Los Angeles just keeps getting football teams. I don't think they want any of them.
Yeah, I think they have too many. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, Louie, I mean, we really, first off, you have some amazing stories and amazing experiences that we really do appreciate you sharing with us.
Yeah.
We want to thank you for being our sixth guest here on Fandemonium. Again, you want to tell the people where they can find you and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I host the Locked On Eagles podcast, which is a daily podcast on the Philadelphia Eagles Monday through Friday. You can find it on any podcast platform. Doing video now as well on YouTube. If you could subscribe to the Locked On Eagles YouTube channel, and we're on Twitter at Locked On Birds, and I'm at DiBiase LOE. So yeah, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to let me speak with you today, sharing my story. And I'm a very nostalgic Eagles fan, so I love taking a trip down memory lane and talking about all this stuff. It's nice to take a break from all the draft content, even for 20 minutes, and just, talk about a lot of the fun stuff. Even though the draft stuff is fun, it can be a lot. So thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Not a problem. Like I said, this has been episode 6 of Fandemonium. I am Chip. That is Johnny. And this has been Louie DiBiase, as we end every show here on the AAT Sports Network and AAT Birds with very positive and happy Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.